Okay, now let's say you had a text of only consonants that was super important, and you want to make sure that everyone pronounces every word exactly right. You don't have to worry about the consonants. They've been set for years. You want to ensure that there's no mistakes, that everyone's on the same page. Nobody says on thy beginning. So the next step is obvious. You've got to find a way to write the vowels in among all of those consonants that are already there. And that's exactly what happened in the 11th century AD. This is when the manuscript called the Leningrad Codex was created, which is the oldest complete text of the Hebrew Bible that we have. And again, to say that again, the oldest text of the Hebrew Bible we have is from the 11th century AD. And this is what it looked like. So all of the vowels are the dots and the lines that are surrounding the Hebrew letters there. Okay, so now we know how to pronounce it, right? Oops. Yeah. Now we know how to pronounce it. So there shouldn't be any more problems in terms of what it means. But there is a problem because who decided how to pronounce it? And the answer is people living in the 11th century AD, which is to say 2,000 years or so after the earliest biblical texts were written. So who wants to bet that there were no errors in transmission in that entire time? The vowels were put in so that the meaning of the text would be absolutely fixed. And so it basically has, in Hebrew at least, but only for the last 1,000 years, which is to say we can't know exactly what the biblical authors intended us to read. What we know is how it was read in the late Middle Ages. That's the Bible. And this text, this 11th century text, the Leningrad Codex, is the basis for all modern translations of the Bible. Okay, here's the next problem. There are typos in the Leningrad Codex. Here is one of my favorites, again, from Genesis, so keeping it topical. Even if you don't have Hebrew, you can see I've underlined the two words with the difference there. And you can see just how very, very similar they are. And the last letter of that last Hebrew word there that's underlined, where the change is. And those two letters have looked the same for the entire history of Hebrew script. So it's easy enough to see how a typo like that happens, right? Someone just missed a tiny little line. But the result is that the text of the Leningrad Codex is a little bit silly, right? In the story, this is Abraham sacrificing Isaac, almost sacrificing Isaac, right? And he's just been told that he doesn't have to because he's passed the test. And he lifts his eyes and he saw there was a ram behind him, which doesn't really make any sense at all. What makes much more sense is he lifted his eyes and he saw a ram, but he saw one ram. He saw a ram there. And so almost every other manuscript and almost every other ancient translation of the Bible has this right. He lifted his eyes and he saw a ram. This is literally just a typo in this one text, the Leningrad Codex. But this is the manuscript that became the Bible. So the King James says he saw a ram behind him. Right? The most influential biblical translation of all time just took the typo and ran with it. But it's a typo. But if you only know the King James Version, you know this as the Bible.